Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Your Legislators. I'm your host, Jonny Coker. We're in week 2 of New Mexico's legislative session, and joining me virtually from the Roundhouse to discuss the session is Representative for New Mexico's 32nd District, Jenifer Jones. Representative, thanks so much for joining the program today.
Hello, Jonny. Thank you for having me.
Of course. And you won your first re-election this last November, and this is now your 3rd legislative session in New Mexico. How have the previous 2 legislative sessions prepared you for this upcoming session?
Oh, well, there's a lot to learn, so I feel like I'm a lot more prepared for dealing with bills and committees, working to stop bad bills, hopefully, and advocate for the bills that are good for my community. I'm also glad that I know my way around better because I have an ankle injury and I'm on a scooter and a boot. And so, yeah, it helps that I know how to navigate the Roundhouse. That's a little bit more challenging this year, though.
No, yeah, I hope you're able to get around the hallways all right.
I have a lot of help.
Just to go off of that, though, what are your biggest goals for this legislative session? Like, what is some of the legislation that you're looking at and some of the goals that you do want to push for your constituents and for the district that you're representing?
Right. Well, I'm sure you know, I'm a registered nurse, and I'm also ranking minority member on the health committee. And so, health for New Mexicans, especially rural New Mexicans, is really a big priority. We have so many things to work on, but especially access to care and healthcare workforce have been those have been my priorities really over that interim and in committee as well. So I have a lot of initiatives in that regard. I feel like in many ways that is a bipartisan. We have a lot of bipartisan bills that we're working on that will improve access to care and access to quality care in rural New Mexico. So I have to say that's a priority. I've also been very supportive of border security, and so we have some big bills in the works where that's concerned as well.
And as a registered nurse, and you mentioned you're a ranking member of the House Health and Human Services Committee, what does our state need to do in order to foster an environment that healthcare workers want to be a part of in order to address the ongoing healthcare worker shortage, especially in rural areas like the district that you represent?
Yes, well, I'm sure we have a terrible doctor shortage, and we need to, and not just that, we have a healthcare workforce shortage in every area, nurses, doctors, but we need to fix the medical malpractice issue. That is big. There's a big debate between Democrats and Republicans on how important that is. But I know I hear all the time from constituents, from physicians, people reach out to me because I'm in the healthcare field, telling me we have to fix that. And it's true. I mean, doctors are leaving New Mexico because it's very difficult to get, it's very difficult to get insurance. And so we need to fix those caps and make sure that there aren't underwriters who are taking advantage of those high caps.
And you mentioned the worker shortage, and I just wanted to read this from Think New Mexico's 2024 policy report on the state's healthcare worker shortage. Quote, New Mexico has the oldest physician workforce in the nation, with over 39% of doctors age 60 or over and expected to retire by 2030. And as a result, the physician shortage is projected to more than double between 2020 and 2030. So what, in your opinion, beyond just the malpractice lawsuit legislation, what does the legislature need to be pushing for in order to foster a healthier and more prosperous healthcare environment, especially with your experience as a registered nurse, like we mentioned at the top?
Right. Well, we need to attract physicians. We need to incentivize them to stay. So we've looked at just practically every measure we could take, but one of the things we deal with is physicians people come up from all over the United States to attend UNM. We have an excellent school, excellent medical school. They do the residencies here, but how do we keep them here? So tuition reimbursement, incentives that would pay back tuition if they commit to, a certain number of years in rural areas, that sort of thing. Uh, Reduce VRTs and increase Medicaid reimbursement. Those are all things that we're looking at to create a better environment. But beyond that, we need to address crime, improve education, and those types of things that just make life better. And because we love New Mexico, we know it's a great place, but all the way around, we need to look at every aspect of life that makes it attractive to people. And hopefully that'll help with the healthcare workforce.
And we will get to those other topics, but I do want to stay on this healthcare worker shortage just a minute. And you are sponsoring House Bill 52, which would expand the rural healthcare tax credit to nurses, EMTs, and paramedics, just to name a few. Can you give me an overview of that bill and how it will help rural areas of the state, especially, close these gaps?
Yes, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about that, because one of the problems we have is getting news out there that yes, we have an opportunity, and we have a tax credit, and getting people to use that and take advantage of it. So it's an expansion this year of the credit that we passed last year, and it's for last year for doctors, for nurses, nurse practitioners, counselors, pharmacists. It was a fairly big group, but this year, like you said, we are including EMTs, paramedics, and I don't have the list right in front of me, but a wide variety of healthcare workforce to get $3,000 tax credit per year, which can be pretty significant. I think it's $5,000 for physicians, but that's an incentive, and a lot of times, even if it just keeps people in rural New Mexico, that's great. And even if a healthcare worker lives in an urban area and works, commutes to a rural area, they can take advantage of that tax credit.
I see. And what are your thoughts on House Bill 42, which would, it's moving through the Health and Human Services Committee right now. It would appropriate over $6 million for providing rate increases to providers that receive reimbursement from Medicaid waiver programs. What are your thoughts on that? Do you have any holdups with that bill, or is that something that you're in favor of?
You know what? I can't really speak to that right now. I haven't looked at that bill carefully. We have been flooded with bills, but I'm eager to look at that and any measure that we can take to improve the healthcare environment and attract and retain workforce.
Well, let's move on then to a bill that you have looked at a little bit, which is House Bill 11 that went through your committee. It's the Paid Family and Medical Leave Act. Last year, you ultimately voted against what was Senate Bill 4 at the time that would have established paid family medical leave into law. And you also voted against this year's version that passed through your committee. So can you just give me an overview of the current paid family medical leave law and what is it in there? Just give me your overview and your thoughts on that bill.
Paid family medical leave. I always start that conversation with, I understand that. I had 7 children. I was a caregiver for my late mother-in-law, my late husband. I know what it's like to need paid leave and how important that can be to our families. I'm not without a perspective on that is real, but we need to do something that's good for both employers and employees. And I know in rural New Mexico, in my district especially, and I think all over New Mexico, we need to be very careful not to pass legislation that harms our businesses, especially our small businesses. They're still reeling from a lot of the legislation we've passed, the paid sick leave that's gone into law, the increased minimum wage, the shutdowns that were imposed by government during COVID. All of those things have really harmed our small businesses. So this bill is going to harm our small businesses. I hear over and over again that businesses are going to shut down. If workers take advantage of 3 months off, they can have up to 4 months of leave, paid leave off, if that employer already gives them vacation time and complies with the sick leaves that we've already passed. 4 months out of the year, and then the employer has to find another temporary worker. It imposes all kinds of regulations on small business that they just can't sustain. It is also very, very vague, and it would allow for employers. It would allow for employees to take advantage. And I'm not saying that many would, but it allows for that. It's vague enough that it would be difficult to manage. And the other part of that is that it would create another big bureaucracy within the Workforce Solutions Department. It would require another over 200 employees just to manage and administrate that fund. So there's a lot of work we have to do before we can actually move forward with that, in my opinion. I always tell people, my goal would be to create an environment where business thrives and that they can reward their good employees with paid time off, because I know most business people do want to reward their employees. So we need to create that environment and take it from a private perspective rather than a hard-handed, heavy-handed government that doesn't always look at the needs of business people.
Mm. And Representative, is there anything in this bill that you would make you vote in favor of it in terms of changes, whether it's changes to the vagueness of the law or changes to even, are there any changes that you could see that would allow you to, or not allow you, but that would, encourage you to vote in favor of it?
Well, I think the first thing that we could do that would change it for the better is to make it an opt-in situation. Because right now, and this was part of our debate yesterday, is it's a tax. It's perhaps the biggest tax increase, or biggest tax that's ever been imposed on all of New Mexicans. And there was a little debate about that, but the fact that we're debating it, is valid. It is a tax, without a doubt, because it's mandated contribution from employees and employers. If it was opt-in, I would start thinking about that. That would be the first piece. But I'm afraid the way it's written, the fund can't even have a chance if we don't mandate it. We have so many small businesses. Most of the other states, I think there are 13 other states that have imposed some kind of, or that have allowed some kind of paid family leave. And I don't believe any of them require pay-in from employers that are that have less than 50 employees. This bill requires pay-in if an employer has 5 or more employees. So it's very different. It's hard to even compare it to any other legislation that's passed in other states.
Mm. And some states, like you alluded to, including our neighbor Texas, allow for voluntary paid leave systems by allowing the provision of that benefit in the private insurance market. Is that a compromise you'd be willing to make? Do you think private insurance has the better interests for people in mind rather than state government?
Yes.
Or do you think that's viable?
Absolutely do. I think we should definitely look at that. I really do, because I think the way this bill is written, it's just destined to fail. And we don't need another huge tax and huge bureaucracy that fails. It wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be good overall across the board for New Mexico.
Mm. And do you think and we talked about the healthcare worker shortage, and I know that's a debate also within New Mexico as a whole, not just healthcare worker shortage, but employee shortage in general, especially within the service industry and other massive industries in New Mexico. Do you think that paid family medical leave would incentivize more people to move into the state knowing that they have these safety nets and they have this room to be able to have a family if they want or care for someone sick? Do you think that could incentivize people to come to the state?
I think the proper bill that's written, that's crafted all the way around and in an environment where the economy is more stable would be, something to look at. But we have to be real. Our economy is struggling here in New Mexico, and because of that, we need to be very careful about the measures that we take that will affect business. The one thing I said toward the end of my debate yesterday was that employers and employees are not in opposition with each other. They work together. If businesses close, employees lose their jobs. If businesses find it too difficult to maintain employees, they start looking at getting kiosks and self-checkouts and replacing people who can either be pregnant or get sick with machines that don't have that problem. We just need to be very careful to pass legislation that works for all of the people.
Representative, I want to move on to some of the other legislation because we could probably talk all day about the medical industry and PFML, but I wanted to ask about Senate Bill 25, which you are sponsoring, that enhances sentencing for fentanyl trafficking. I believe it's above 1 kilogram. Can you talk about that bill a little bit and tell us why you've sponsored it?
Well, I'm especially interested in that bill because a lot of the drugs that flow into New Mexico come through my district. And I know that border security is a federal issue, but every other state has joined in with the federal government to assist with border security. And that's not something that's happened in my district. And so I've looked at every way possible as a state legislator, to help with that issue. I think, it's only common sense to know that this fentanyl is trafficked across our borders, and so that the penalties should be increased. And the cartels that are in charge of, they monitor every square foot of the Mexican side of our border. They incentivize Americans to get involved in this trafficking. And so if we can make it more difficult or more costly, have consequences to that, I think that on this side, it could assist that problem. And it would affect lives, it would save lives, hopefully.
And this is in some ways an immigration bill, or not immigration, a border security bill, I should say. Do you think that, but it also has to do with the opioid crisis as well. Do you think that this could help alleviate and hopefully take off some of the fentanyl, hopefully take fentanyl off the streets in some capacity and help what's going on with the opioid crisis right now?
That is definitely the hope that would happen. And I think, we just need to keep taking measures to move forward with that. If we don't, there's no end to it. And so I think, this is a good step.
And what other legislation would you be in favor of in terms of helping individuals with substance use disorders or dealing with the opioid crisis in general? Is there anything off the top of your head or anything that you would like to see within this legislative session to help alleviate the effects of the opioid crisis on individuals in your district and in New Mexico as a whole?
There are several avenues, several perspectives to look at that. The thing that crosses my mind, first of all, you may not think that it is directly related, but we're really working on mental health and having facilities that are regional, and having money for facilities so that we can have them in various areas of the state. People always do better in treatment if they are close to home. And so, so the mental health issues that people have are often just closely related to drugs. There's just a whole package there that fits together: the homelessness, the drug use, the mental health issues, and in every level that we need to address. So that's been a big push of mine as well, to make sure that we have services, we have facilities that are needed to address mental health issues.
I was going to ask about opioid settlement funding. Is there any conversations happening within the halls of the Roundhouse about where this funding should be going, or where it would best be used, like you're mentioning, for mental health services, for housing? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, there's so many things when any one of these issues. One thing that I'm working on is an effort to prevent those opioid settlement funds going to pharmaceutical companies that would have caused that opioid crisis. We don't want to be buying Narcan from a company that to help with fentanyl overdoses. We don't want to be buying the Narcan from somebody who caused the problem. We don't want them to get that money back, and I don't think that's right. So I am working on that. That's just one thing that we're looking at.
And we started this conversation talking about the bill, the fentanyl trafficking bill, but I wanted to move back over to border security and immigration just in general. Do you feel like, what would you like to see in this legislative session to address those issues? What would you like to see from the state in terms of technology at the border, in terms of immigration reform, maybe even at the national level, being in a district that is on the border of Mexico? What are your thoughts?
My perspective on that up until this election has been focused on crime and focused on security. I know that immigration is a federal issue and it's closely related to the problems we're having on the border, but there's not a lot I can do about immigration, specifically. The number one thing, and this has been something I've been advocating for, and I actually have a meeting with the governor tomorrow about this, but try to get her on board, because I think everybody is in place to help with border security as it relates to keeping New Mexicans safe, especially people in my district. But the number one thing I think we can do right now is to buy cameras that are placed along the border and hook into a system that's already effective, successful, and in place in Arizona. There are actually some of those cameras in my district, right in Hidalgo County. There's a sheriff's department that watches the entire border, and so every other measure that we use, we're going to try to. We have a big package that will address border security, and one of that is to form a border security division as a part of the state police. And it's, I think, $30 million toward that, which I'm all in favor for. We have a shortage of law enforcement on the border. We need more of that. But that's one thing. But the thing that I personally have been involved in is advocating for these cameras, because every other measure we take, it means that we've already allowed people, criminals, traffickers, sex traffickers, human traffickers, to come into the country, and then we have to try to catch them. We've given up ground, basically, if we let them through. These cameras can watch people before they ever even get into the country, and we can address it then. So it's a package deal. There are, in this package I mentioned, that Republicans are putting forward. It has the $30 million for the border security division, and it has several million. I think it's $10 million also for technology. But the cameras are cheap. All we have to do is buy the cameras. We already got a system in place. Just hook into it. It's huge.
And Representative, what's your thoughts on the political rhetoric going on with immigration right now, especially at the federal level? Like I said, being in a border district, and I know in my own reporting there's a lot of individuals, people in mixed status households. Some families have individuals that are covered under DACA, some individuals not, that are worried about getting caught up in federal deportation efforts. What's your message to your constituents about what's happening at the federal level and what you will do as a representative in your district to, what your plan is as a representative in a border district?
Yes, all of that is very new from the federal level. So I think that what we're doing right now is just watching to see how this plays itself out. There's so many rumors flying and people are fearful. I don't think it's time to be fearful. I think it's time to watch and make sure that what I've heard and what I'm aware of is that there's an effort to rid this country of criminals, and there have been criminals coming into our country. And so to rid the country of criminals, regardless of where they came from, that I believe is the measure that's being taken right now. I would do anything I can to help, if it calls for it, to make my district, the people in my district, feel safe. Right now, I don't think being in fear is necessary. I really don't. So, but as this develops, I will do whatever it takes to make sure that my people are not in fear and that they have safety. That's always been my focus, is to make sure they're secure.
And Representative, we are almost out of time, but I did want to ask one more question. We are in the middle of a current federal funding freeze, grants freeze. and it looks like that may well affect New Mexicans. As someone who has worked in healthcare, how essential are these things like grants that help with funding for things like community health centers, especially in rural parts of the states, whether it's healthcare or infrastructure? Like, what are your thoughts on that, and what's your message to your constituents who might be fearful about this current freeze that we're seeing in the federal government?
Yes, well, like I said, I've been involved in getting into the Capitol here and getting involved in my state responsibilities. So I'm not really up to speed on exactly what's happening from the federal level, but I'm a state legislator and I serve my people. If we have to work things out with the federal government, I say, let's do it. I will advocate for them, whatever it takes.
Well,
I don't want us to lose our benefits, lose our funding in any way, and I will advocate for that.
Well, thank you, Representative, for coming on the show today. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Good luck with the rest of the time in the Roundhouse.
Okay, thank you so much, Jonny. I appreciate the opportunity.
That's all for today's episode. Coverage of New Mexico's legislative session will continue next week. If you have questions you'd like to ask New Mexico's lawmakers, you can submit those questions to feedback@nmsu.edu. In the meantime, you can stay up to date on the latest local news at krwg.org. For KRWG Public Media, I'm Jonny Coker, and we'll see you next week for another episode of Your Legislators.